exactly. All right. Hello and welcome to FCI Live 2026. Thank you so much for being here and being a part of it. This session is kicking off week 2 for those of you who are here live. I know some of you are watching this as a video later, and this is public officials as your co-op's champions. I'm very excited about this session with Faye Mack, and we'll get into that more in just a second. Real quick, I just want to thank our cooperative sponsors, and this, I did it again. I want to thank our champion sponsors, specifically Frontier Co-op, Cabot Creamery Co-op, and National Co-op Grocers. They are uplifting this whole series and making it possible for us to make it free to everyone across the country. Thank you for cooperating with us. All right, so we're here to talk with Faye Mack, and I'm going to stop sharing and let her get her slides up. But while she's doing that, some of you may know Faye was the executive director of FCI until just past last spring. And that's because she brought a lot of cooperative experience in governance, in working with food and on co-op boards, and also though in working in food justice and working directly with public officials on food justice for many years. She's going to talk about that in just a second. But we were very excited she was willing to come back and share her expertise around this because it's kind of rare expertise in the food co-op world about positioning ourselves with public officials and as public organizations. And, I just want to point out that Faye is now, we're lucky working with food co-ops as a strategic planning support for board governance and how to position your cooperative in public spheres like this. So I'm going to turn it over to Faye. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, JQ. Thanks, everybody. Hi, it's so nice to see all of you and see some familiar faces I haven't seen in a year. As JQ said, my name is Faye Mack. I am very honored and proud to be the former executive director of FCI and have had the privilege of working with JQ and many of you over the years. Um, and I'm here today, because of that experience, but also because I have had a background in working with public officials and elected officials, both as a co-op board member. So I was a staff member and then a co-op board member for about a decade for a co-op in Burlington, Vermont City Market. And while I was on their board, we navigated a lot of growth and change, multiple general manager transitions, a decision to expand and to build and open a second store, the pandemic, and many more, and worked with local officials through that. And then also spent about a decade or more in the advocacy world, working on legislative policy advancements for food justice at state and federal levels. So I've worked really closely with public officials and have seen the power that they carry firsthand and experience the benefits that can bring. And so I'm excited to talk to you all today about how to harness that for your co-op work. So what we'll be doing for the next 45 minutes or so is I'll be walking through some slides to talk about sort of who public officials are, why do you want to work with them, when do you work with them, how do you work with them, and we'll have opportunity to answer some questions throughout, but then a bigger chunk of time for Q&A at the end. Please feel free to use the chat. JQ is going to keep an eye on that and let me know. JQ knows how to interrupt me when I need to be interrupted with any quick questions, and then we'll also have some specific pauses. So please share your questions and we can get into them as well. So to start off, I do want to just start with a little bit of an acknowledgement about working in government and that kind of sphere of power. Working with the government and working with elected officials can be complex, needless to say. And public officials hold a lot of power. And while many of them aim to work with their full community, to support their full community, many also cause a lot of harm, great harm. I live and am presenting today from Southern Vermont, which, like all of the United States, has experienced groups of people and individuals being systematically oppressed, marginalized, brutalized, and murdered by government and these institutions, beginning in my region with the genocide and forced removal of the Abenaki, Wampanoag, and Mohican tribes. So I think it's important to name that and just recognize that public officials have caused harm to many communities and continue to do so today. And so many of us have many reasons not to trust the government and elected officials and may not feel super safe engaging with certain levels of government and individuals. And those experiences and the history that you as an individual and your communities carry are very important. And I don't ask you to ignore that in taking on this work. I ask you to carry that and to hold that present, as you're doing this work and to listen to your gut as you're going through. And at the same time, remembering that co-op organizing is a very political act, actually. It can be nonpartisan and it should be nonpartisan, but it is political. And that engaging with governmental systems is important to your success throughout this process. And that cultivating champions within governmental institutions can be really transformative for your project. So just a little bit to say that first as we go through. So, who is a public official? It's kind of a vague term, which I chose intentionally. And we're talking about public officials. We're really talking about someone in any form of government who's the face of something. So that person who's out front representing a specific branch of government, a level of government, a specific commission or committee or agency or department. Those people can be elected. And that's who we often commonly think of when we think of mayors and governors and members of legislature and Congress. They can also be people who are appointed, so political appointees who often lead agencies and departments. But they can also just be staff, career staff who have a public face, who are just, applied for a job, got a job, and it stays through different terms in office. All of those people are who we're talking about today. So, and we're talking about all levels of government. So that may be your city council or your select board, committees and commission members at your local level, on up to mayors and department leaders, state representatives, governors, and then on up to your members of Congress. So we're talking about all of those people, which is a lot of people potentially. And it's too many people to cultivate a really meaningful relationship with. So in this conversation, we're not talking about engaging with all, 75 people you can name who are public faces. We're talking about creating some authentic connections with key people who are either strategic or who are ready to go being champions of your co-op and your co-op's development. So as we go through, we'll touch a little bit on like, how do you choose or why, or, how would you identify any of those people? So why bother? You have a lot going on. There's a lot of people that you're trying to cultivate and get to join your membership, to sign up as potential vendors, to negotiate real estate deals with you. Why do you need to add this to your list of people to reach out to? And it's an offensive strategy and a defensive strategy. So on the offensive side, an official who really loves your project is one of the greatest champions you can have in a public sphere. They can help pave your way to success, both by publicly championing your project, by lending credibility, making it feel more real when government official talks about it and says it's something really exciting in your community. And they can also help ease barriers and help you navigate through different steps of your process, from land use and zoning to, getting the right health permits and all the rest that you'll need to do throughout your process. It's also a defensive strategy because if you have a public official who is either uninformed or misinformed about your project, ambivalent about your project, or who is opposed to your project, they're not going to help and they could really harm your project. So it's worth trying to get out in front and build up some strong support there. And I have a couple pictures throughout. As I said, my a lot of my personal co-op experience has been with City Market in Northern Vermont. And so just as an example, this is a picture of the second location opening and the ribbon cutting. And the people in the picture are the general manager, the mayor of the city, and the two city council members who live and represent the neighborhood where the co-op is in. So it's a strategic, photo op of leadership there. All right. So how can they help? What can they do for us in this offensive and defensive strategy? So we'll talk a little bit more about some of these, but they can help build public support. They come out, they say that they care about it. There's a quote about them. They show up at an event. It helps raise your profile. Media are more likely to come if they know that some distinguished public figure is going to be there. They lend credibility to your project. They can assist in milestones and processes, especially the local officials when you get into permits and all the rest. Um, they can help grow your network and connect you to other people. They're usually well networked people. And so if they are excited about your project, they'll help you connect to other people you might need, including funding opportunities. So they may be connected to philanthropy that might be interested in supporting the co-op, but also they know the levers to pull at whatever level of government they're in around different grants and other funding opportunities that are available. All right, before we get into when to reach out, are there any questions that folks have about any of that?
We'll give you a second here. Put any questions you have in the chat. And I have a question, but I think you'll get to it later. Well, someone IM'd me, but I don't know if you meant to privately DM me or if you meant to DM everyone. Either way is fine. You can privately DM me your questions. I think it's going to be a later question, but they did ask. They said we did this, and then there was turnover, and the next mayor did not like our project. Hope you're going to touch on this.
Oh yeah, I can definitely talk about that a little bit. I think I wasn't planning on talking about that, but it's a really good point. So I'll come back to that for sure.
Awesome. And I love your defensive, offensive. So if we really want people to pick up on that, that was terrific because the other defensive I've seen is, have anyone else met? And I'm sure if you, maybe Faye, I'm weird, but I think you've probably run into it, is there being people in public office who are actually, when you do reach out, 5 years later and ask a question or whatever, they're offended you never even brought the project to them and informed them. They like to feel like they're in the know about their community. And is that a fluke that I ran into that, or do you see that?
No, and actually, that's a really nice lead in to our next part of the conversation, which is when should you reach out to them? And so, something to what you're saying, JQ, to remember is that people want to be helpful in general. People want to be helpful and they want to be useful. And they also, especially people whose role is to serve the community and represent the community, it's good for them. And hopefully, intrinsically, what they want is to know what's happening in the community. And a new co-op is a really exciting project. It's a huge economic development driver. I mean, all the reasons that you know about why you are excited about developing your co-op are the reasons that someone who is representing the town or the region is going to be really excited about the project as well. And so people like to be in on the ground floor, which is why when you want to reach out to people, you want to reach out to people early and often. That is kind of the top line there. Um, and to do so strategically. So like I mentioned at the beginning, there's a million public officials that you could reach out to, and you don't have the time and space to cultivate relationships with all of them. So this is where, when you're thinking about what stage of development you're in, is part of how you can start being strategic about your time and your energy and who you're reaching out to. And so this is also just a picture, another example of a city employee. So this is a staff member, somebody who's not elected, um, who is a city employee of the city of Burlington, where City Market is in. And they were tapped for a 50th anniversary celebration video to say why the co-op is meaningful in the community. And so that's just another example of how to utilize relationships with public officials. So, so when do you reach out? At the beginning, so when you're in the early stages, you want to be reaching out to help build your foundation of who's going to support. So at this point, you can safely focus at the local level. The only time at the very beginning when you really want to start reaching out at a higher level, like the state or the federal level, is if you know you're going to need something from them. So if you know that the only way to get a project like this across like the finish line is if your state legislature supports it, then you probably want to start talking to them at the beginning. Or if you know, in order to do this, you're gonna need a very, you're gonna need a HUD grant at some point or some kind of funding source, then you might want to start reaching out in the beginning. But otherwise, you can really focus at the local level because what you're trying to do there at that point is build legitimacy to your project and to get people who are kind of there every day and have the same constituents as you do to start to support the project. Um, so you're going to start with people who you suspect are going to be champions of your project. So you don't need to start out by reaching out to the curmudgeon old guy who doesn't like anything new in town or, whoever. You can start out with the people who you suspect are going to be really excited. Um, and if you know where you're going to go, if you already know, if you start out with your building or you start out knowing really clearly where you're going to be, reaching out to those people who represent that specific community or that specific neighborhood is also another place. Because as JQ mentioned, people don't want to feel like they didn't get brought in the loop, and people don't want to feel blindsided by some constituent at the post office saying like, oh, did you hear that there's this co-op that's like, gaining ground that's going to go in down the street? They want to hear from you first. So you're going to start with those kinds of people who are going to get excited. And then as momentum starts to build and you start to have milestones, like you have a really successful membership launch, or you're doing a lawn sign campaign that everybody's picking up long signs, and it's starting to build momentum, or you're having, you've launched your vision statement or your mission statement in a way that you feel like, you're really proud as a group to start sharing that. That's when you might want to start reaching out a little bit more broadly to kind of local elected officials because you have something to show for yourself. Once you have enough momentum that it's not just you and the three other people on your steering committee who are excited about this project, you can start to reach out a little bit broader. And then as you really start to hit the kinds of milestones that feel really tangible to people on the outside. So something that warrants some kind of press event with fancy shovels and a hard hat or, a ribbon cutting or any kind of major milestone that helps make your co-op's development feel really real for people who aren't part of the project. That's when you really want to start reaching out and to those state level people or and a little bit higher up because they want to be part of that part. They want to be part of the celebration. Um, so that's you can kind of grow and it allows you to start small and be sustainable in your efforts. Because what we'll talk about as we keep going is how important it is to maintain the relationships. These relationships are not one-offs. When you feel like you're done with somebody and you've kind of gotten what you need from them, you still need to maintain a relationship with them through when your store opens. And so it's a kind of a forever thing that you're getting into. And so you want to do it in a way that's sustainable. You don't want to pick the top 25 people and go all in with them right away. Start small. So some tips to remember about that is to connect before you need them. So you want to make sure that you're inviting them to events or you're asking for a meeting before you have a really big ask of them that you like absolutely need them to say yes to, because you want to start to build that relationship in a way that feels authentic and not that you're just coming to ask them for something. Um, and if you don't hear back the first couple times, especially if you're starting to reach out to federal level officials or state level officials, don't be disheartened. Keep trying. Sometimes it takes a few times to get on someone's radar. And this is where if with staff is especially important. So once you start to get up to higher levels, the mayor, in most states, not Vermont, but in most states, I think state legislators have staff. And at the federal level, those staffers are actually who you're probably going to be building the real relationship with and who can get you in. So if you're not hearing back from someone, this is when you start reaching out to your friends and and the other people developing the co-op and saying, does anybody know anybody who works in this office, even if they're not in the right department or they're not on that right topic for your issue? Finding someone who's within who can pass along a word of so and so is trying to meet with so and so, that's going to help you. But just don't give up. If you're just sending a cold email, you're probably going to get ignored for at least a couple of times. Um, Another important thing, especially in these beginning stages, is to reach out to both sides of the aisle. And that is something that is important both strategically and if your co-op is incorporated as a nonprofit, or you have a nonprofit arm that is doing a lot of the charitable grants and fundraising, you have to be nonpartisan legally. And so it's something just to remember that to be reaching out to both sides of the aisle, you don't have to push on both sides of the aisle or to people who aren't really generally supportive of this type of initiative. You don't have to put in extra effort to get them to engage, but you do need to be kind of reaching out and creating the opportunity for engagement to folks. Um, Kind of relatedly, another piece around your when you're thinking about when to reach out is to just avoid election cycles if you can. It's a kind of you will have a bit of a hard time maybe getting to somebody if they're busy, or they may see the co-op development as as a campaigning opportunity and not as a long-term supporting opportunity. And if your co-op's development gets tied to a specific candidate and then they may not win, it could really harm your efforts. And so just in general, and and for those who have a nonprofit connection, there are a lot of rules that come into play around election cycles that are just like you don't even want to deal with them. So that's where it can be good just to like pause for 6 months before you start reaching out to people if it's right in the middle of a heated campaign cycle.
I am getting privately messaged on purpose, and that's okay, folks, because they wanted to continue. They said that's what happened to us. We
Mm.
became a platform for a mayor. We thought he was really supporting the co-op, but we really became a talking point, and when he lost, it did not go well for us. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's hard, right? Because when people are campaigning, they're also really looking for issues to campaign on and things to champion and stuff to get them in front of the press and in front of constituents. So if what you're doing aligns with a candidate's issues and values, they're going to be super pumped to latch on to your project. But you are here for the long haul. And so it's just an important thing to be thinking about when you're engaging during that time. And that can be hard in today's political climate when everybody is campaigning all of the time and it doesn't really feel like there are breaks in that cycle. So it's just something to be thinking about, even around folks who are running for a reelection, right? As opposed to maybe a first time candidate who isn't already sitting in that seat. Um, Another piece too, just to think about and I've mentioned this before, just the maintain the relationship. You're going to need to maintain the relationship. And so when you're thinking about think about that too. Like, does your team have the capacity to maintain this relationship right now? And we'll talk a little bit about what that actually means. It's not huge, but it's enough where, you don't need a Rolodex of 50 people that you're trying to really build these relationships with all at once. Um, and yes, I'm seeing in the chat just a reminder that engaging with their people is good too. So I don't know, Sheila, if you meant staff or other people, but it is true. Like you want to engage with their staff, you want to engage with their constituents and folks who are working with them or supportive of them as well. And that can help you get to the people.
I just want to mention real quick too, we didn't talk beforehand, so this didn't really occur to me, but if you're working with the Food Co-op Development Framework, I think actually this falls really strongly under the trust resource. Keep
Mhm.
thinking about building trust with the people who we want to become owners, but I think that this is really interesting and that this is actually a trust building exercise as well as a resource for your community.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And so then let's talk about this is kind of the meat. Like, how are we engaging with them? What am I asking you all to go do? Exactly. Like, okay, Faye, I understand that this is important, but like, what am I supposed to be doing? So, what you're supposed to be doing is connecting. And your purpose behind all of the different ways that you might connect with an elected official is that you want to inform them, you want to listen to them to help make connections about what's the angle that's going to get them really supportive of your project. And you want to make a meaningful connection. So, back to what JQ was saying about trust building, you want the relationship to feel meaningful. Elected officials are always being asked for things and expected to give things and to give support and to give their time and are asked a lot, and especially at the local level, they may or may not be getting paid for their time and they may not be getting paid well, right? And so it's a lot. A lot of these jobs are not supposed to be full-time jobs, but they are full-time jobs. People are always on, when they're in the grocery store, they're being approached. And that's the nature of being a public face of something. But you want to just remember that as you're going in, that you're really aiming to build a connection with trust. And so there are a few kind of core ways that this can happen. One is and we're going to go into each of these a little bit more detail. One is to invite people to events so that they can experience the energy that's being built around the co-op. Like get them to something where they can feel excited about it and see like, oh, whoa, this is real. People really want this. Request a meeting so that you can sit down and actually have a direct conversation about what you're aiming to do, the progress, needs you have. You can, after you have cultivated some form of relationship through those first two kinds of activities, you then can start inviting elected officials and public officials to speak at events. So to speak at press conferences, photo ops, other areas where they get something great out of it and you get something great out of it. And then in the maintaining relationship side of things, you want to keep them updated by sharing news articles, milestones, great quotes, and we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So invite them to events. That's the first one. You want to invite folks to come and experience the magic of co-ops and the magic of co-op development. It's a really unique kind of community organizing that brings out folks are working towards a really positive vision. And so the energy at your community forums or your tabling events or at a, meet and greet with potential vendors, any kind of events that you're having, those are going to be full of really amazing energy that they're going to want to be part of. So start to invite a couple of people to some of those different sort of events. And when they're there, make them feel very welcomed. So you want to welcome them, you want to introduce them around. Depending on the formality of the event, they might want to say a couple of words just to say hi, and it's so nice to be able to be here and meet you all. Um, Make sure they're hearing from people other than you who are excited about the project at the events that you're inviting them to. And then something that I will say for every step along this way is to take pictures, to share your pictures on social media and to tag them. And if you have swag, give them some swag, because if you can get a picture of them with your co-op hat on, that's even better. And they'll go out and about and wear it. And then the other piece of it is to always follow up with a thank you. So thank you notes. When I was working in the legislature, I probably spent half an hour every day when I was in the state house writing handwritten thank you notes that I would deliver to pages to deliver to the legislators. Just a little like, hey, thanks so much for being in that conversation today. I really appreciated X point. But really thanking people for their time, both publicly and privately, is very important. So making sure you send a thank you, doesn't have to be snail mail, but like make sure you send a thank you and make sure you're doing that social media tagging or sharing a picture in your next newsletter, something where you're publicly showing that you're engaging with these folks and that they're showing up for you because that makes them more likely to show up for you again. There is a little bit of a give and take in these kinds of things, right? And making it mutually beneficial is really helpful. Um, so that's where you're thinking about different kinds of events. And those are happening throughout the year and you can think about different ways to bring them on. If you're running any kind of program, so I know a lot of startups are also managing a CSA program or doing food delivery or a lot of folks are already kind of doing something, invite them to that. That's super tangible and they can really feel that energy.
We have Sean in the comments just saying that that's how they developed their relationship with their now mayor. He used to come to early events when they were when he was just an alderman, and yes,
Hey,
they love the notes.
yes, yes. I mean, like think how excited you are when you get mail. Doesn't happen that often. All right. So then request a meeting. And this is something that you'll do ongoingly. Um, Meetings are really important. They can also be really short. So you will over prepare for your meetings, and that's a good thing. Especially when you start to hit members of Congress or people at a higher level, your meeting might be 5 or 10 minutes long, and that's okay. That's not a snub from them. That's literally how long their meetings are. And you may only have that time. So you want to be ready to use that time. And what's really important to remember when you do meet with somebody is that you don't want to overtalk. So we all have a tendency because it's not, something like developing our co-op is something we're super passionate about. And there's so many things we want to share about it that we can feel like the purpose of the meeting is to inform. And that is part of the purpose of the meeting. But the bigger purpose of the meeting is to listen and to ask them questions. So you want to get to know them as people and and in their role. Find out about their interests, their values, what their vision is for the community, especially if they're like at a mayor or governor, or some kind of level where they're really representing the community. What's their vision? What are they passionate about? And that can really help you find that common ground to say, well, you love this. That's why food co-ops are so important and why we're so excited about our program. Let me tell you about that. And I can give you an example that's not co-op related, but in Vermont has a very long-standing governor who was very against the issue that I was advocating for, which was free school meals for all kids in public schools. And he did not support it. And so who we met with generally was this one staff member who was sort of his legislative liaison. And in our first meeting, we were just asking about her and trying to get to know her. And she shared that she had a middle schooler who loved school lunch and was so pumped about school lunch every day. And her whole face lit up and she was full of joy, sharing the joy that her kid felt at school lunch. And she was paying for it. And we had just this really wonderful conversation about the power of all of the kids eating the same meal. And, a lot of we were able to kind of make this connection. And it ended up being this really grounding point in our relationship that we came back to time and time again. And her kid kind of went off to high school in this process. And, but we always could keep talking about their experience with school lunch. And it was a way to make it personal for her in a way that helped us in our work with the governor's office. He's still against it, but he didn't veto it. So, and I credit her advocacy a little for that too. And that was because we found that common ground instead of talking about poverty statistics and hunger statistics and some of the other things. It was like really linking to their, people's own personal connections and their own values. So you want to be listening, you want to be getting to know people, and that's how you can make authentic relationships and really make those connections. When you're in the meeting, especially if you're only going to have a short time, and because you're spending so much of your time listening and just, having them leave with a nice warm feeling about you, bring a handout, but don't bring too many handouts. You want like just enough for them to take away and like flip through before it goes on a pile on their desk. Don't bring too many things. And again, take a picture, share it on social media, send them a thank you note, bring some swag for them. And importantly, in these kinds of meetings, is to also have an ask because people want their time to be used meaningfully and purposefully. So if you are coming and asking for a meeting, and really all you're doing is just telling them about a project, and if they're like, "What can I do to help?" and you're like, "We're good. We're just, on our journey," then they don't have a purpose to participate. And so you want to give them an ask of some kind. And it can be really small. It could say, "Can I sign you up for the newsletter? Do you want to, can I give you a lawn sign? Like, are you ready to support it?" It can be a bigger ask, like, "Would you be a face for our newsletter with a quote, or something like that?" It can be, something like that, an opportunity to support the project, or if you have something really specific that you do need from them, like, "We're getting ready for our zoning permitting and like I could really use your advice," or "I've been trying to connect with this person." You want to have an ask. People want to feel purposeful. So even if you're sort of making up an ask, make up an ask so that you have some reason that they spent their time well beyond learning about a really cool project that's swimming along just fine. All right. Let me check my notes for a quick second because I've just been talking.
I think one of the asks we used at my co-op, and it was actually sincere in my case because I don't have a lot of experience in this, but was to say, we're doing this, and then it was like, so, and they're like, yeah, so what can I do? And I didn't prepare for that, but I was like, who do I talk to find out about economic
Mhm.
development opportunities? And then that question, like, you can find that on a website, but they were so excited to tell me who they thought would be the best person in the department to talk to, and it can be as simple as that. Like, we want to I think it made them feel very good that I was working their connections, that they were valuable because they knew
Mhm.
people. And that can be useful too.
Yep, that's great. All right. The next way that you can be engaging with public officials is to invite them to speak. So you do want to make sure that you've built some kind of relationship with them before you invite them to speak at your event, because you want a level of control where you can say, "Here's our topic and here's some of the main themes that we're trying to get to," or at least know that they're not going to go totally rogue and say something that you don't agree with. So you do want to kind of cultivate, and this is strategic, right? So you do want to be thinking about, who do you want out there speaking at your events? What's the image of the co-op that you are trying to project? But if there is somebody who it would be beneficial to your project and they're great champions and they're not mired in controversy right now or something like that, inviting them to speak at an event is a really good way to demonstrate the support and bring attention to the co-op. Um, in general, we all in developing co-ops should be having more of these kinds of events. They're really good to have. You want to be in the media as much as possible. You want to celebrate things. It's an opportunity to help make what you're doing feel really tangible in the community and like milestones are being met. So press friendly events can be things like press conferences, they can be photo ops, they can be community forums. In general, if there's anything that feels really public facing at all or might be at all interesting, invite the media to it. And maybe invite some public officials, but definitely invite the media to it. Press conferences themselves, I will be the first to say, can be extremely boring to attend and participate in. Sometimes it just feels like there's 15 people all in a row thanking the other 15 people and saying kind of the same thing. But they make for really great news clips and clips for it's really more around generating pieces for media than the actual event sometimes. And that's okay. That's, everything has its purpose, and that might be it. It might not be a super fun event, but it might be a really great way to connect with people and to generate some buzz around your project. So when you're inviting a public official to speak, this is where you can invite them to come, invite them to say a few words. This can be for anything from big tangible moments like ribbon cutting or groundbreaking ceremonies or anything like that. But you can also come up with other really exciting things like, the 200th day of organizing. I don't know, come up with some stuff that can help get some people there. And these events are really mutually beneficial. So this is one of those places where it's kind of like, we shake each other's hands and know we're both going to get something out of this because it's a really public press event. So again, you want to be publicly thinking and privately thinking, and using this opportunity to really build credibility with the broader public. Um, there are some pieces here. So if you do get into organizing things like press conferences and you start to invite elected officials, there are some things to remember around um, hierarchy and kind of common, like conventionally accepted protocol. For example, if you ever have federal officials, you always start with the most senior member of the Senate, and then you work your way down and then into the House. And so there are things like that where if it's a staffer or if it's that elected official, there's an order of operations, and people are very happy to help you figure that out. That's what the staffers are good for. I once tried to mix it up and have somebody else speak first, and I got a very gentle little call saying, "It's actually not how it's done. I see what you're trying to do, and I appreciate you asking me to speak first, but I cannot speak first." And so there are pieces like that that you'll kind of be able to walk through, and there's folks locally who are able to help you think about that knowing. But it's in general, you kind of start at this highest scale and the most seniority and work your way down in terms of order of speaking. All right. So stay in touch and keep them updated. So remember, as in our personal life, in this as well, relationships take maintenance. And we can't just reach out to someone and have a meeting and then never talk to them again. The biggest thing to remember is that you don't want to let someone wonder if that co-op thing is still happening in your town. You want them to know that it's still happening at all times and that it's moving forward. So think about the person in your life who still cuts out newspaper clips and sends them to you in the mail. That is who you want to be about your co-op with public officials, but through email. So send them quick little updates. If there's a great newsletter or newspaper article about the co-op, send it to folks to say, "Hey, I wanted to make sure you saw this. Things are going really well. We're so excited." If you have someone sign up for a membership or ownership and they give a really great quote in their why are they joining, share that. Um, these notes can be short and sweet, but you want to be touching base with folks often. Invite them to events as they come up. In general, kind of a helpful rule of thumb is that you want to try to make some kind of contact with folks at least every 6 months, maybe every quarter, depending on how fast things are moving or who they are. But you don't want to let a year go by before you've touched base with someone again. And even if they've already done their thing that is helpful, and you don't really need them anymore, you should still maintain that relationship. So say you were really cultivating a relationship with folks on a commission that deal with land use development, and you kind of made it through all your permitting processes. You don't really need them anymore, but you do need them, and you should still maintain the relationship, even if you kind of like got the thing that you were working with them on already. So you wanted to be reaching out, you want to keep them updated. And this to the person who had the really good relationship for the co-op that had the great relationship with the mayor, and then the mayor changed. This is where cultivating relationships with both the staff and the elected officials in those kinds of sense can be really helpful. A lot of high level staff will also turn over. But if you're working also with different departments in the city, and kind of you can help build that up. And sometimes if your project is in a place where it's pretty high profile and moving quickly, you can sometimes be part of like a transition meeting or something to help kind of transition the relationship, to hopefully help ease that. But you are also in some ways kind of starting over again. So there is a lot of sort of turnover, knowing that co-ops take a long time to develop sometimes. You may see a couple of mayors come through and can keep making that relationship. All right. Some final tips to remember, unless JQ, there's anything in the chat that we want to touch on before going into this.
I think we've got a main Q&A question, but I think we'll
Great.
hold that for main.
Okay, perfect. Um, So just some things to remember just to drive home as you're thinking about how to do these kinds of activities. Remember to utilize staff. They may be the people with your real relationships. That's especially true at the higher levels. Um, if a staff member is passionate about your project, they will make sure that you stay on the radar. So they're really important and not to be overlooked, and they can be really helpful in figuring out how to kind of do something strategically. Remember to thank the officials publicly and privately every single time, always. And to get photos so that you can demonstrate the support and thank them in public settings as well. Um, Remember to approach this in a nonpartisan way if that is what is appropriate in your community. So some communities, there is not much ability to be nonpartisan at the moment. In some communities, there are. So approach it how it makes sense in your community. But remember, especially in the beginning, to approach working with elected officials with a broad sense of mind. Um, Co-op development can be framed in so many different ways, and there are ways for people to find a foot in from different perspectives, and those are important. Um, Listen to what they're saying, find shared goals, come back to those shared goals. It helps to even write little notes after your meeting to say, so and so has a 10th grader who loves to skateboard and they like to eat, their favorite food is X. Like write those things down so that you can remember them because those are some of the ways to help build those kinds of relationships. When you're working with them, remember to make your engagements meaningful and purposeful, so that you're using your time and their time well. So those that helps me in thinking about it. And the biggest piece of advice that I got when I started doing some of this work that I still carry with me and I say out loud to myself in my car before I go into meetings is they are just people too. um, Elected officials hold a lot of power. They're often very busy, and it can make it feel, and they're like in this rushed, scarce time mentality a lot of times. And so it can feel like they aren't really paying attention to you, or it can feel like they don't really care. They can come off as arrogant. Sometimes they are arrogant, but they are also just people. And remembering that they're carrying their own worries and their own stressors, and they might have burnt their mouth on coffee that morning, or like who knows what is going on, but they are people, and in this conversation you are actually most likely the expert, and so you add value, and remembering those things has helped me a lot in talking to people with power, that everybody is just a person too. And so I say that out loud to myself all the time and recommend that you do too, because it can be scary going into some of these meetings or just really intimidating to do this or to worry that you're going to set up a press conference and you're going to have people speak out of order. People will let you know, and everybody makes mistakes. It's all good. And everybody is just a person too. So, with that, I would love to answer questions, talk about examples, different experiences you may have. And we'll talk for a few minutes. And I also just wanted to note, because I'll stop sharing my screen, that my email address is there, and I'm always happy to brainstorm with you and think through what you're working on as well. So, feel free to reach out. All
Excellent.
right.
And do you want people to throw questions in the chat, or if we call in folks, are you okay with unmuting?
Totally. As long as
Okay.
they are.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and have Ty unmute. And if you want your email address shared with Faye, if you want to stay in contact that direction, go ahead and put your email address in the chat while Ty is discussing, and we will share that list with her. We don't share information without your permission. So if you want her to have access to your email for further possible things that she might be sending out or working on, please put that in the chat. And I'll turn it over to Ty.
Great. Thank you. Well, first, I wanted to just, compliment you, Faye and Jay Keith for having this session because it's phenomenal. And I think since I've been with the Aliquippa Food Co-op and, got into the process of getting it going, that was one of the things I really tried to push is getting the officials involved. But real quick, I wanted to say one other avenue I did was I got the superintendent and the school principal involved. with it. So that way we can get some of the kids involved in the process as well, too. Some of the juniors, seniors, sophomores, get them involved with the process and understanding about the food co-op in their community and what it means. And it's been really successful. So I'm working with a cohort of kids, hoping to keep them involved in this process so that way they have a voice and some input in it. So I just wanted to share that nugget of information, and definitely don't leave the school district out, because depending on what
Mhm.
the area you're in, school districts have a big, they play a big role in the community. So just something to keep in mind.
Oh, that's a great point. Thank you, Ty. What a cool way to approach it.
Love that. We've got a pair of questions, one in the chat, one in the direct DM, that are kind of about difficulties. So, how do we get the support of a mayor who manages by decree, who with little response to public ideas? And then the one the DM was, what do we do with a mayor who wants to tell us what we should be doing with our project? We're brand new and we feel like he's feeling insulted because we're not doing exactly what he says.
Well, both of those are really interesting. So, if you aren't feeling heard, so I think in both of those instances, what I'm hearing is that people are having experiences of not actually being fully heard. That's where, um, don't give up on the direct line of communication, but that's also where utilizing community and media and other opportunities can really help to shift. Um, I think an underutilized method is things like letters to the editor, because those are the kinds of things that most people might not read and absorb, but people in those positions are going to get them flagged for them if there's a bunch about something. So if you are having a mayor who just won't give you the time of day, having kind of over the course of a couple months a letter writing campaign to directly to the mayor or through the press, through letters to the editor, those are kind of methods that can kind of get to them in a different way. And often I find that if people are managing by decree or something, they are responsive to a community swell, that feeling of like, oh, it's not just one person, there's a lot of people. And so that's something that I would think about. And when someone is telling you what they think, I mean, it's a lot of smile and nod and take what you want to take. You don't have to do what they want you to do. And that can be really hard, but you also don't have to push up against it right in that moment. So sometimes, especially if they're doing it in a confrontational way and putting you on the spot, just deferring a little bit, like, oh, that's really interesting idea. I'd be happy to take it back to the group and we'll talk about it. Or like, we'd love to consider that. And then, you may or may not even need to circle back to it with them.
That's phenomenal advice. I have not known what to tell people in that situation before. I'm going to ask John to unmute. John was up next, and then Sean.
Next, you, JQ. Hey, Faye, how's it going? Good to see you.
Ah,
John Guerra from NCG on the line. Faye, what's your experience working with economic development agencies to learn more about funding opportunities? And when thinking about those, how do you think about the timing on reaching out to ED agencies versus public officials?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And I think I would think about economic development agencies kind of in that same realm of different departments and agencies that you want to be cultivating before you need something from them. So I would reach out to them early. They're the kinds of folks that even before you launch membership or something, you can start talking to them. As long as you have, I'd say as long as you have enough behind you so that it's not just you. And there are other people working on this with you. Reaching out to those kinds of agencies can be really helpful. And the way I would start is just by saying, we're trying to do this. We would love to learn from you and ask for advice and ask for, how go to them for information. And they'll be able to help start pointing you in the right direction and appreciate kind of being on the ground floor. Because what they don't want, and a lot of actual government agencies don't want, is to have to come in and fix something that they could have, if they had only talked to you in the beginning, and sent you on the right path, then it won't be, they want to get in the beginning and help set you on the right direction rather than have to try to solve something or change something later.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that, Faye.
Yeah.
Sean.
Hello, everybody. This is a great conversation, and we've been blessed. I just want to share this. we've been blessed with building a relationship with our mayor because he was showing up at our events when he was an alderman. And then there was another there's a person that appointed himself a mentor to us, which was great. And he, had us navigate how to have that conversation with him when he became mayor because they knew he was going to become mayor, right? And so our first few meetings, he was asking, what can we do? What can I do? And someone told us to ask for discretionary funds.
Mm.
And we didn't know. We just did
We
what we
just
were told, right? And so he gave us $10,000. And so the last 2 years, he's been giving us $10,000 these last 2 years. So just to throw that out there, I don't know if that's in everyone's jurisdiction or purview to do, but if mayors have discretionary funds like that and it's a grant and it
Mm.
comes with nothing attached, we just have
Wow.
to, yeah. We don't have to report anything. The only thing we have to report is at the end of the year tax season to prove that they gave it to us, and that's it. So that's we've been blessed to have that opportunity.
That's great. And that just shows the power of building relationships and maintaining them, as people transition into bigger and better roles. That's exciting.
The DMs are popular today. I'll get one more for you, which is when the relationships have been built by the board and then you hire a GM, our experience has been the GM doesn't maintain those relationships as seriously as we did, and it has
Mm.
caused issues when we've come back later. What are your thoughts on whose job it is, board versus GM, to maintain these relationships?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So in my experience, it had been the general managers. So in Burlington, City Market had a pretty unique situation in that its store was they beat out a conventional grocery store for the spot with a promise around conventional foods. And so they called the supermarket principles. But because of that agreement, there was actually a formal agreement with the city, which means that the co-op presents to the city every single year, kind of a like state and update, and that is totally operational. And so in some of those kinds of instances, I think it could go either way, but it really needs a partnership because especially once your co-op is up and running and moving forward, your board members transition all the time. And the general manager is actually most often the stability. And you want that person to be cultivating those business leadership. I mean, there's business leadership. And so those are relationships that should be maintained. But boards can help, especially if there are board members who are well connected and kind of part of the city or the town, kind of in that community. I think there's opportunity for it to be a partnership. But I would say it falls more firmly in the GM camp.
Which means let's get that into those job descriptions, folks.
Yeah.
And expectations that they're going to maintain those relationships you created. We have time if there's like one last question or shared experience people want to share right now. All right. This, oh, did someone just unmute? No, okay. This has been an absolutely, if you said, a fabulous conversation. Faye mentioned a long time ago that she should do a session like this once. And I called her up this time and said, remember back when you were working for FCI and you said, I'm like, nobody has this expertise the way you do. You should come do this. And I'm really glad you all found it super valuable. And I did have a question. If people give their email address, will you share a PDF of the slides?
Yes. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I can send
Okay.
that around for
So if you
sure.
haven't put your email in the chat yet, but you wanted that PDF of the slides, go ahead and do that because we're going to share your email addresses with Faye. And I am going to just real quick tell you what's coming up next. So we are, first, I just want to thank all of our sponsors. These are our fellow cooperators and believers in just food systems, and they are funding this session and this series so we can all have these conversations nationally for free. So these are our partners in doing the work, and thank you to them. Coming up the rest of today, Resilient digital infrastructures for startups. We get so many questions about digital infrastructure, how to keep track of things, what systems to use as you're building your ownership base, as you're building your funding base. And Aja Simmons, who has a lot of co-op experience from Digico, is going to be here along with Johnny Streets and Ricky Bailey from NovaWork Corp, talking about how you not only can like maybe find a way to muddle through tracking all that information as you're developing as a startup, but actually build structures that are going to make you better at organizing. I'm actually dying what they have to say because it's not one of my areas of strength. And then we also tonight have this one I'm excited about too. Co-op grocers holding community through crisis. The times we are in say that crisis is going to keep coming, and food co-ops have served communities and the communities for decades, a century in the U.S. as a not only as a place to get food, but also just supported the community through real crises in many different ways. And Tamaya Israel, I'm very excited, is going to be here facilitating a conversation with Natalia McCarthy and Ray Williams, both amazing GMs of existing food co-ops that are in Chicago and Minneapolis and have supported their communities through moments of crisis. What is the role of food co-ops in that, and how do they look at it? It's a bigger conversation that is just getting started, and I hope you'll join us for it. Thank you, everyone, for being here today.